Hello, and welcome to CEE Centre for Young Black Professionals video podcast 2023. We have named it The Way Forward, Black Mental Health and Change Makers. Today's episode is a conversation on Black mental health in the workplace, and I am here with three very knowledgeable individuals when it comes to that. But before we start, I would like to acknowledge the land in which we work, live, and raise our families on. We would like to acknowledge the land in which we live, work, raise our families, and live our day-to-day lives in. We pay tribute to the many diverse nations, Inuit and Métis people that were original stewards of this land. We want to acknowledge those who came here involuntarily, forcibly displaced Africans brought here because of the transatlantic slave trade and slavery. The CEE team is grateful for the opportunity to utilize this space, delivering our services and supporting to empower the Black community, and we now call home. And we acknowledge that and pay tribute to those folks who have allowed us to come here as visitors. So as we move into the conversation, we want to, number one, thank the City of Toronto for the opportunity to make this podcast come alive with their support. So shout out to the City of Toronto. And now we're going to get into the conversation. We have several Black leaders here at the table who have a wealth of knowledge in this department, whether you are leading a Black-led organization or you're just doing this work from a mental health lens. And so I'd love for you all to let our viewers know who you are, what brought you here, your roles. So we'll start over here.
Hi, are you able to hear me? Perfect. Hi, I'm Osman Ali. I am the Director of Organizational Managing at Generation Chosen, along with being a full-stack developer within myself.
My name is Paul. I am the Executive Director of the Black Health Alliance, and we essentially work to improve the health and well-being of Black Canadians.
Awesome, thanks.
Hi, my name is Sheena Ewan. I'm the visionary founder at OnePeopleTO, as well as a creator and wellness professional.
Amazing. Awesome. So I think we're all very well equipped to have this conversation. For those of you who don't know me and you're like, why is she still talking without telling us who she is? My name is Agapi Gessesse, and I have the honor and the privilege of being the Executive Director here at CEE Centre for Young Black Professionals. So we're going to get into the first question. How often do we talk about mental health? And do you think that it's still a taboo with individuals in the Black community?
Definitely, I think it's still a taboo. I think that we want to talk about it. I think there's really a longing for Black folks of all backgrounds, all demographics to talk about it. I think it really comes down to having a safe space for folks to be able to do that. So bringing down their guards and to be able to hold people in a way that doesn't cause further harm.
Yeah, for sure. I think we see that here at CEE a lot as well. I think the younger generation has a desire to have the conversation, and maybe sometimes those conversations also might be stunted when they enter into their homes when we look at generational pieces. So I completely agree with that.
Yeah, for me, I kind of feel the opposite. I feel like churches, mosques, in my day-to-day work, young people, even folks of my age category, everybody's talking about mental health. I think sometimes people have a negative reaction to the fact that folks are talking so much. Folks feel like folks are weaponizing, things like trauma, etc. But I do agree with the piece of like being stunted. It's because when folks are actually identifying issues, the challenge that I hear most often is that, okay, they don't know what to do after they've identified what the issue, that there is an issue.
Within myself, I see it as it's seen as a taboo due to the fact that I see that the language is something that's rather skewed, or there's not much knowledge within there, or it's still seen as a newer form of health, which is quite saddening, but.
I might be in a bubble.
It's interesting because I work a lot with folks that are, you could say, like on the fringe. So tends to be, folks that may be experiencing homelessness in the queer and trans community. And so I think that there's a lot of personal awareness, self-awareness, and really like I said before, like a longing and a desire. But again, having the spaces where they're not going to be rejected or questioned or pathologized. I think that's probably the most important part.
Yeah, I think that we are probably seeing this conversation happen a lot more in our community, which I think is a positive. But I also think that sometimes it is coming to the place where I think when we're even thinking about the young people we serve at CEE, we're often there's so many other things going on, like dealing with the trauma is something that can happen later. Like when I get to this place or when I'm able to get on my feet, then I'll deal with like the emotion piece. But right now I'm like a little bit in survival mode and I need to focus on that. And so I think that kind of opens up the question around our, as a nonprofit sector, our role in this. So what did the nonprofit space look like when you first started out as a Black professional? And what is one of the distinguishable approaches or policies that you believe is essential in creating spaces for Black professionals today? So that's in any different kind of, it doesn't necessarily have to be the nonprofit sector, but as Black professionals entering into your careers, whether it's, we all are leading Black organizations now, but what did that look like before? You also mentioned that you're a full stack
A
developer. How dare I? Yes, a full stack developer. So that's a space that we don't see many of us in.
Within the web development space, it's very strenuous, or a lot. It's quite a lot due to the fact that there's a lot of expectations that you've once set for yourself, along with you see other applications. Let's say, for example, like Uber or Instagram. It's the way that they're already built, and it's like you could see that it's already been done, but you are already setting that expectation within your own mind that you were capable of building that, because it's already been done. But again, there's a multitude of steps, there's a large team that's right behind it, and that right there is already a massive strain within yourself, along with other expectations that are set by other people. So for myself, it was setting clear expectations towards myself, knowing what I need to do within the tech space, which had helped me out quite a lot.
Policy-wise, I just kind of want to jump into there. It's something that we're still developing because we're still like a new organization. What I will say is that when we have a for-profit and a non-for-profit. We opened the non-for-profit really, one, to be able to provide programming and sliding scale services on a preventative measure edge, which I think is still something that's new for people to understand, why we might do like a Reiki session or mindfulness as preventative care. And so that's something that we're still developing, and ultimately that's coming back to why we opened this space, because there are so many organizations out there that aren't Black focused, that aren't Afrocentric, that don't come into that awareness. So when you're going into a space that's focused on mindfulness, and you're not reflected in that space, it can be hard to even ask your body to settle. And so that's why we ended up opening OnePeopleTO. And yeah, continuing to look at policies that are being unaddressed, like the gaps in service across the board.
So that's something that you're implementing in your organization, kind of like as an activity as a preventative measure. So those are kind of the activities that you guys are doing. So that's embedded in the work that you're doing.
Right, yeah.
That's amazing for your employees. I'm sure Steve would love some Reiki sessions. I'm sure that I'll get questions about that later.
I feel like entering in, the word that comes to mind is crisis. It's like I think my first memory of like thinking about the sector is Youth Challenge Fund and like all the conversation around that, the gun violence and organizations responding to that. That's my entry point. But just following that trajectory over the last, let's say, 20 years now, or almost 20 years, it's like tiny organizations up against massive problems and staff running around trying to address those situations, sometimes while the community is in crisis and while the organization is in crisis. And I think to the policy piece, it's hard to choose just one, but I think a lot of the conversation I've been having these days is about like how are we working to strengthen organizations. Just like forget all the issues, just strengthen the organization, because if you have a strong foundation, then you can think about like how do we create that safe space for staff to then do the hard work that they have to do, so I don't know, that comes to mind.
Yeah, I think about the first thing that came to my mind is I don't think that I, in the beginning of my career, really felt like me being a black professional and the tensions of that entering into the sector until I actually was leading organizations and was dealing with part of being at CEE was being very intentional after leading an organization with an all-white board that just didn't get it. And I realized, like, you know that saying, all my life I had to fight, like every day was like, okay, what am I gonna have to advocate for today, right? And, leading an organization, I'm sure all of us understand that, like, you want to be able to have, like, a vision, make it clear, and kind of, like, run towards it. But when you have all of these obstacles in your way that have a lot to do with, like, anti-black racism, not understanding, the folks that we're serving, how we need to be serving, it becomes very exhausting, right? And so that kind of leads me into what I wanted to talk about next, which is really around burnout is very real in the sector. So much to what Paul was discussing, like, most of the time we are problem solvers, like, that's our jobs. Like, no one's coming to us to be like, everything's going great today, let's celebrate. Like, that's not what we're here for. We're here to problem solve. And so oftentimes there's chaos in the folks that we're serving's lives. There's usually, you're always trying to just, like, keep the doors open. So there's the stress of that, the long list of things to do. And so burnout is really real. What are you guys implementing in your organizations to ensure that burnout is something that you're promoting, mental health and prioritizing it, and that we're avoiding burnout, much to what we see before? Because we also lose a lot of leaders and potential leaders when we don't kind of pay attention to that. So
personally, I can say I think what I've learned over the past few years, not just because of COVID, but even situations that were happening in 2019, how important it is for me to be well. Yeah. And that you can't really be well you can't really do well if you're not being well. And then, understanding that everything kind of comes from the head, so I need to demonstrate that. And sometimes that means maybe sometimes things fall through the cracks. And so I've really been intentional in putting things in place. So whether that's having, like, a volunteer kind of board, if you will, setting up kind of kind of catch-alls, so that other people can pick up where I am leaving off, beyond the payment situation. So beyond employers, having people that are interested and willing to invest because they understand that they're also investing in themselves by investing in the community.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And not to mention the Reiki and everything else you got going on over there.
It's definitely a benefit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I feel like torn around this piece around burnout, because the first thing that came to mind was, like, nobody tells you how isolating it is to be an ED. You're not really part of the team, and it took me a while to realize that.
That's a good point.
And then, like, coming from my experience, I sat on the board before I took on the role as an executive director, and so obviously I'm not on the board either. So you're kind of in an island alone, left to manage, like, the needs of the staff team and manage the needs of the board. And I think there's a certain level of, like, trying to, like, manage all those needs and relationships, keep it going, because if you drop something, like, the whole thing can come down. And it's, like, on you, right? So, like, I know the importance of, like, that conversation. I think some of the thing that's missing for me from the conversation is, okay, like, as an ED, particularly if you're a new ED, how do you structure the work, structure the organization to really support, like, your own, like, health, and then, like, the health of staff. Some of the things that we've done is, like, really early on, even when we had a smaller team, was to try and get, like, group benefits in, because the team was asking for it and it was really important. In addition to that, we've added, like, a wellness spending account. So whether you want to spend it on Reiki or you want to spend it on gym or whatever, like, that's for you. And then, like, a separate health spending account for, like, just mental health support if you needed it. So it seems exorbitant. Some folks are like, yo, you're small, you can't be doing all of these things. But I think investing in that, like that health of the team is critical and important. Lastly, like, some of the things that we're working on now is to try and, like, we're a small organization. We're a team of 10. We're taking on 10,000 things all at the same time. So it's always go, go, go. But how are we thinking intentionally about like structuring the work? How are we being intentional about not making sure that everybody's at 100, all of the time, and then just creating that little buffer space. So whether it is that we want to take on a new thing, or the team's not always like running on full capacity, it just creates a better environment, I think, to deliver a better product and like to manage people's health. My own thing now, that's a different story, but I'm working on that. I have Agapi to advise me.
Within burnout, I mostly see it within myself, as I had done nothing but a large amount of work for days on end. When I say days on end, I mean staying up for 2 days straight, which I thought that was a normal within the tech space, but most definitely it's not. You're never going to be at 100 if you're doing that. So when I had became lead within my development team, it was figuring out how to set up a line of clear communication between me and my team members, and understanding what problems were set with them. And then after I started to see, I'm like, oh, these are problems that I was having that I didn't have the opportunity to communicate about. So within Generation Chosen, I am more than happy that there's a large line of clear communication between both EDs along with the whole team as a whole. So with any form of problems, there's something we're able to communicate about, and you feel as if there's more help within there, because within development, I felt if I was just by myself. Most importantly, I was the only developer, so I practically was. But feeling that there is some form of help is the first step, at least for myself, within burnout.
Yeah, I think at CEE, I think a lot about the alumni staff, like people who have been a part of the organization and have moved on, but how paramount those staff folks were in building the foundation of the organization. And we were much smaller once upon a time, and so it required us everybody to do everything and be on like 120% all the time, and that proved not to be sustainable, right? And so the segregation of duties is like very important. Everybody kind of having a smaller piece of the pie, but understanding that their role is really critical, and allowing people to exercise their leadership in that. Because what was happening before is like, okay, we're a small but mighty team, and I think a lot of the time in our communities particularly, we love like, it's almost like if it comes easy, then it's like not worth having. And so we're just so used to the struggle, right?
Yeah, I hear a lot of people say like, I work so well under pressure. And not to say that we can't work that way, but do we have to? Do we want to?
And like your frontal cortex, like, come on. Okay.
Exactly.
So like, let's, so I think we're so used to that. And so as an ED, it's like, I always, in my mind, I knew like, okay, this person's like running on 200% at this time, like they're gonna run out of gas soon and they're gonna ask me to take a rest, and I'm gonna need to be able to pick that up. So like the constant is like the buck stops at us. So I just have to start to think about like, okay, well, this person's gonna take a rest soon, which means I gotta rev up and get ready to like fill that in. And it's not a sustainable model, because by the end of it, I'm just like, oh geez, I'm tired, right? And so I think acknowledging that, like segregation of duties and like giving people smaller slices of the pie, and also as a sector, us being like, we cannot do it all. Like, you want us to do this much with this much, you're gonna need to come with this much in order to get this much. Like, we just have to set some boundaries for our mental health, our staff's mental health, around managing expectations, because I think we're so conditioned to say like, oh, here's a little piece of like, here's a drop or here's a dime, make $3 out of it. And the math is not mathing. And we need to come to a place where we're like, I'm sorry, this doesn't work for us. And so therefore, like, go back to where you came from and like come again. I think that is something that we collectively kind of have to, as a sector, start to do. Otherwise, we're just gonna have unsustainable organizations. I do want to say there's a lot of things that CEE does do around those things. Partially, as I was going around, I'm like, my team is going to watch this and be like, oh, a spending account. But one of the things that was, I'll name one of the things that I thought was really, really important is I always compare things to cars, even though I know nothing about cars, but we used to have like hoopty, like Honda benefits, and for people to, like EPA is like great, but it's not culturally relevant. And so, you know, people being able to afford to go get a massage if they want, or go to see their own therapist that they're choosing that's from their community. And so we definitely like shopped around and made sure that we went from like a hoopty to a Tesla. And so I'm very proud of our benefits. Like whenever people start, I'm like, read our benefits package. You'll never see anything like it. So that's definitely one of the things that I'm super proud about. Well, I know that kind of we've had a lot of conversation. I want us to take a break, and please stay tuned. We'll be right back after these messages.
Greetings, everyone. I'm Kofi Hope.
Hi, everybody. My name is Shireen Ashman.
And we are co-founders for the CEE Centre for Young Black Professionals. And today we want to talk a little bit about CEE's journey. So the history of CEE really goes back to 2005, the year of the gun, which is, you know, to be honest, an emotional time to think about, especially with where we are in 2020 with gun violence in community. And having seen a few of those cycles, but at that time, it was a year that was incredibly traumatic. So many young Black men and women lost their lives. I was a student and advocate at the time, and so many of us in community were saying, we need a real response, and a response that invests in youth and actually understands Black youth aren't the problem here, but the solution. And with the right supports, we can actually turn the tide around these issues. And from that was birthed, you know, the Youth Challenge Fund and a series of responses, but YCF specifically one about supporting new initiatives that could be led by Black youth, focused around meeting the needs of young Black men and women who are facing barriers. And so when I came back to Canada, I was overseas. I was approached around a project, what they called a legacy project of the Youth Challenge Fund, and asked if I could start assembling a team and getting folks together to build an organization that could have an impact around these issues. And so CEE really started in 2012 in the Jane Finch community. We spent a year doing research, trying to figure out, you know, what was the right place for us to be to create economic opportunities and move youth forward in a way that was actually authentic to what young people were looking at in their lives.
And for me, as a survivor of gun violence, like connecting with Kofi around this issue is of huge importance to me. I wanted to do work in this area, not specifically around how do I kind of heal communities from gun violence, but how do I help Black youth to discover and uncover their talents so that they don't have to see that type of avenue as the only way. And how do I help them to kind of rediscover their talent? And that's one side of it, but also demonstrate to the larger public that Black youth is a talent pool that is untapped. And it definitely requires their investment, not only financial investment, but leadership investment, and looking at how do we bring that to the fore in a very practical way. And a lot of the curriculum was around exposure, like exposing Black youth to different avenues, different opportunities, different industries in which they probably have not maybe explored before, and even exposing Black youth to different spaces in their own city. Kofi is always the leader in terms of bringing us into nature and teaching us about different plants and etc. So it was just always important for me that level of exposure is there.
Yeah.
Right? Not only for industry, but as a person, like building the whole person. Because I think, and I continue to think, that really sound career that is long lasting happens when the person feels whole. right? And when they know what their different strengths are, and when they have a system of support of folks, whether that's inside of their communities or outside of their communities, but just a system of social capital that they can go to say, hey, like, I have this problem, or I need to figure out how the system navigate this thing. And to this day, I still get calls from some of my members that I worked with in 2012, 2013, around like, okay, this thing is happening at work, Shireen, like, what do you think I should do?
We are the CEE Centre for Young Black Professionals.
Committed to cultivating a talent pool of young Black professionals
that positively impacts
the Canadian labour market.
And we're back. I totally feel like I have my Oprah on right now. So thanks all of you for your contributions in the first segment of our conversation. We're gonna go a little bit deeper and ask some questions around, as Black executive directors leading, organizations that are really supporting our communities, where do you guys keep your energy? You talked about weaponizing trauma earlier. I want us to maybe also acknowledge, like, most of us come here because it's lived experience. We're not here for the paychecks, let's be real. And so we're coming here because we're coming with purpose, right? And so for yourselves, like, where are you putting your energy? Where are your boundaries? Where are you creating those things? What actions are you taking to make sure that you're also checking in with your team to make sure, the vibe check, seeing how everyone's doing?
For myself, I myself am not the ED of Generation Chosen, so I'd like to get that out of the way. But within check-ins within my team, it's more of figuring out where we all are, like how we did like a check prior towards this conversation. How are we all doing? How's our day been? Along with other things that have been mentioned prior, like if something is a big accomplishment towards someone, let's say, for example, pursuing a certification in something, and they've mentioned it towards you, asking follow-ups within there, being not too much a part of their lives, but some for, like, they're having that form of conversation with you. You should know a bit more detail within there, or ask at least. Yeah. That right there was the video.
That's good.
I think there's an expectation with EDs that, like, everything and you have the solutions to everybody's problems, and at least that's the way I feel. But I think one of the key things is, like, getting up on your mental health literacy, so that you're understanding what it is that staff may be going through, or the kinds of support that you may be needing to offer, or like when this is an issue that needs a bit of a different response. And oftentimes there's a bit of a struggle, right? Because there is often like a top-down relationship with an organization that is an employer and the staff who are employees. And like where the line is in terms of, like, people need a month, you just give them a month, or like, and if you know the work that we do that's heavy and intense, like, do you just kind of set up that policy, or do you have a kind of different response? And I think to a certain extent I'm still like working through those pieces, but that understanding of the issues I think is important, so that kind of, I guess, sometimes what those boundaries are, because at the end of the day, like, we're here to work needs to get done, but at the same time, we're not here to, mash up folks and then chew them out and spit them out and kind of hire new folks. So I don't know, I think struggling with that a little bit sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. I think something that comes up, and something that came up for me earlier too, is understanding people's workflow, like helping them to understand and having conversations around that regularly.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so how people produce, I think that an important part of supporting the people that work with us are, one, understanding how we work, and then being able to fit in where other people work, and how they work. That may mean that they're not working between 9 to 5, because those are not the ideal hours for them. Their brain is not turned on at 9 o'clock in the morning. And so maybe they would rather work on a flexible schedule, and as long as they're producing the work, then they can then make their own schedule as it, maybe fitting it around meetings or like that sort of thing. And allowing people to, really empowering people to understand what works best for them, and having them present that to us so that we can then create a schedule that works for everybody. something else that we've been kind of like toying with is really having a set of months that are on and a set of months that are off, like twice a year. It's something that we're still kind of developing, but similar to how some organizations are going to a 4-day work week. Really, because we are so based in, earth culture and nature, aligning ourselves with the seasons, really. So the summertime, really making sure that our schedule is a little bit more flexible, the events are lighter, and then doing the same in the winter. So having, like, the high seasons tend to be when people are ready to be out and about. So in March, and also in September, when people are really focused on what they need to do for the end of the year and what their next steps are personally and professionally.
Yeah, I love that. I love the fact that you touched on the fact that people work differently. And also, Paul, kind of people always thinking that the ED is like this oracle that knows all things all the time. And I think being transparent about not knowing is kind of what I have adopted, is like, I don't know all the answers to everything. And so I need everyone to like catch their corner and like learn your corner really well. And I think when we're also doing this work in Black communities and working with Black professionals, we also don't have to adopt this colonialistic way of leading organizations, but also acknowledging that our funders and the people we're obligated to still work in those systems. And so I struggle with that because I'm like, there needs to be KPIs because we need to deliver on this thing. But what I found really helpful has been to be open and transparent. Like, as much as everyone's looking to me to figure out like how much this program is going to cost or like what's needed, you tell me. Like, you're there with the young people, you tell me. And I think creating a relationship of trust where like you tell me what you need, I will go deliver it, right? But it's, you need to exercise your leadership wherever you sit in the organization, because I'm going to listen to you just like you're listening to me. I'm going to listen to you. So if you tell me we need X, Y, and Z, I'm going to go fetch X, Y, and Z and bring it back. But that means that you're going to need to deliver on that. You're going to need to put your best foot forward. And everyone in the organization is what's driving this thing. It's not me as the ED, figuring it all out. Like, no, this is a collective opportunity. And one of the things that we recently have done in the organization, which I found really helpful, I don't know about you guys, but like all staff meetings are always, used to be like, oh my gosh, like what am I gonna say to them? What are we gonna like, I gotta figure out and go have 10 conversations about like, what do people wanna learn? And to be quite honest, when I was running them, they were like really dry and boring and like not probably as fruitful. And most of the time when the team is doing something, they're coming with innovative ideas. They're like doing all of the things. And so we actually ended up breaking up all of our departments and creating teams. So people from across across the organization that wouldn't naturally work together are given an assigned month. So there's like 12 groups, and they all come up with, we had the list of kind of professional development opportunities that need to be made. So they all have a theme, and then they come up with how they want to do it. Something fun, but then something serious, and then a professional development. And we have it for the whole day. We're actually having it tomorrow, and I cannot tell you how excited I am for these, because the team just comes with such innovative ideas. Like, once we had like a sports day, we're learning in the midst of it, but like we had such a good time. And I also don't know about what it is with like Black people and games, but like
Be competitive.
we are
Which
so competitive.
I was gonna say, which game specifically?
It doesn't even matter. We could be like, who could get to this paper the fastest. It's like all work like sets loose. But I found that has been such a team building opportunity. But things are so much more fun and engaging because the staff are going to know what it is that they need. And I think the more we empower them to create the workplace that they want, then less pressure on us as EDs to do the traditional way, which is like, whatever I say goes, when that really isn't the case, because people make up organizations. If my entire team decided I don't want to do my job today, like I'm going to be in trouble, So the next thing that I wanted to kind of talk about a little bit was partners, because we love partners sometimes. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I love them, sometimes I don't. And this is kind of in the line of work that we do. Sometimes our funders are our partners, sometimes other organizations. Generation Chosen, shout out to you. You guys are a huge partner at CEE. And so what does that look like in terms of letting your partners know about the mental health needs of your staff, your members, the folks that you work with? Often in the beginning stages of CEE, we saw a lot of this with kind of cherry picking. Like we would have partners that had their interest at her and maybe weren't seeing what we saw in a young person in the long term. And so, when a young person shows up at our door, we have like the vision for them to see what they'll look like at the end. But then maybe some of our partners are like, oh, well, that young man has an ankle bracelet. How's he going to show up at a program and like have all of these assumptions? And those are some partnerships that we had to be like, look, our values are not aligning, and like even though this is coming with a financial benefit, like we need to prioritize the needs of our members' mental health and like how we support them. And so, what are your boundaries or conversations that you're having with your partners? And what's your kind of checklist?
I don't know if I have a checklist, but I think going through a ton of terrible partnerships where, like, my rule now is like we're always coming in as equals, and we're clear from the very beginning like what the contribution from each partner is going to be, and then we can start to align around like what our values, what we're trying to achieve, and like how we want to work together on a specific issue. But going through that journey of like terrible partnerships has given me the insight that you really need to like take the time to build that. You can't be frightened for money and just slap together a partnership just because you're going to get the money. I think laying that foundation in a way that's going to be easy, because like partnerships shouldn't be hard, like getting money shouldn't be hard. I think then creates the environment for a little bit less stress, which then I think might help with the mental health.
Tell me more about terrible partnerships, Paul. What does a terrible partnership look like? Seeing how you've had so many, just choose one.
No, I won't go into any one in specific detail, but particularly if you're a smaller organization and you see an opportunity to work with a bigger organization, sometimes you just want to jump into that because you think they know more than you do, they can help you get to the next level. And like that's not always the case, right? And so we found ourselves in those kinds of situations where we're working with big X hospital, but the mutual respect isn't there. The director of the project is racist. We're working on a thing that's focused on black people, and we have to sit down there and say, okay, like what do we do in this situation? Do we just say, hold your money and leave the table, knowing that this is a specific issue that community has raised that we're trying to address, or do we, try and like figure out how to manage that situation? I'm saying it's best not to be in the position where you're having to like manage those situations. All relationships kind of go through ebbs and flows, but it's best not to be in that situation. You kind of have to make sure again that you're lined around your values, how you want to work together, who these people are, and knowing that you want to work with them, particularly if it's a long period of time. And you have to, as much as possible, try and come in on an equal playing field. If there is a power imbalance, unless you're really sure that they're coming with a certain energy, there's going to be an issue. And then outlining those contributions for those partnerships, making sure everybody's on the same page, just creates the environment for me for less stress.
That's good.
Definitely aligned in really presenting the value from the beginning. And I think probably the most important thing that I've learned and that Paul you spoke to is that relationships go through ebb and flow. So even if it's a personal relationship, you set the standard or the expectation from the beginning, knowing that there's always going to be some ebb and flow, some up and down, or trial and error, trying to navigate and really even troubleshoot, particularly with organizations that may not be from our background, they may not be Black, they don't even have to be white. They just may not have the same understanding. And it's through the relationships that you get to understand, like, is this going to be a value add, continue to be a value add for us mutually, or do we have to look at how to do things differently, maybe with another partner? And oftentimes that comes with challenging, crucial conversations. But I think this whole piece of partnering is really an essential part to get folks that are not Black to understand the work that we're all doing and how important it is. And I think this is really part of the education piece that if you're not Black, you most likely will not know. And teaching people our values by being in a relationship, I think, is the hardest part, but also the work.
Yeah, that's so true. Relationship is like the key to it all, and I think we often forget that. Like, no matter what, like whether it's a funding relationship, whether it's a partner relationship, that we actually have to get to know each other and like figure out, just like you would with anyone on your team, like how you're going to work together and what your flow is.
Within my end, in terms of partnerships, the only one that I've experienced was with CEE.
And it was wonderful.
It was
obviously.
amazing. I had a great time. It was the way that I was introduced towards CEE and knowing the things that are showcased within CEE in regards to mental health, along with the program Project Alchemy was absolutely amazing to operate or to help out with. That most of the kids did the majority of the work. It was more of just me leading them. It was absolutely fantastic. But in terms of partnerships, again, for myself, I'm still a new addition. So I'm entirely unsure of what is still up to hold, but I'm honestly excited. But you've mentioned something along the lines of terrible partnerships, and I don't know where that will lead to within myself in terms of later on within the future.
Yeah, I think partnerships, the thing that I would probably even say about partnerships is just like being really upfront at the beginning about your intentions. Like with funders, I always say this work costs money and it takes time and we cannot skimp on either. So like, and like this is what a partnership looks like for us, which means if you want like an all-in partnership, it means you're coming with some funds, you're coming with human resources, you're coming with relationship building. So really like setting out very clearly for the partner or the funder, like this is what it's going to take to actually be, because oftentimes we think it's just like, okay, we're gonna just, you're gonna give us some money and then we're gonna slap your logo onto our website. But for us, we're basically co-signing that company or that organization to say, these folks stand with the Black community. And if that's not really the case and all you've done is like written a check, then you're not really in relationship with us. And so,
Have you turned down money?
yes, most definitely. I could boldly stand in front of this camera and say we have let go of money. Yeah. Because not all money is good money, number one. And number two, also creating boundaries around money. Because if you're coming with like,
Bare minimum.
yeah, you're coming with snack money, you know what I mean, to put in, my purse to have on the train, but you want to be presented as though this is like sit down 3-course meal, it's not aligning. And so I think we have to have, granted, I also will say that like CEE had grown to a particular place where I was able to do that, but in the beginning stages, I'm going to be open and transparent. Like any money, I was like, okay, we'll make it work, sure, jump how high. Like in the beginning stages, I had to do that in order to build where we are now, and like that's a reality of that.
See, it's interesting because if we take the city of Toronto, for example, there's this idea that, okay, grassroots organizations are the ones that are, semi-volunteer and struggling, and you have the big organizations like CEE, well established, and then you have, the emerging organizations that, I guess are in the middle there. They would look at us and say that, we have audited statements, we have a board, we've been around, that we are established, when I feel like we're emerging. Because we may have some dollars in our account today, but I like tomorrow isn't promised. So yes, I do find myself in the place where I have to sit down and think about like, do I take this money, or do I set that boundary and refuse it, knowing that I have 10 staff that are either on contract or full time, and we need resources to sustain those roles on an ongoing basis. And I think at the end of the day, like, if you can't make it work, it doesn't make sense spending the time trying to make that work, because you're going to spend so much energy trying to fix all of those problems. It makes more sense to spend some of that energy, getting, double that, whatever it is, to support those pieces of the work. That's the way I think about it now. But definitely, maybe 2 years ago, I would have been in a different space.
Right. I also think we need to think about how much, okay, so when we're talking about partnerships, usually, those things do come with money. And so sometimes you also have to look at all of the work that someone is asking us to do for the amount of money. Right? And so because I have seen it happen where I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. You have a little bit of change. Okay, we'll take that. Like, we're just trying to fill up our wallet. And then when it comes reporting time or whatever the case is, I'm like, the time spent to do all of this was like basically the pay that they had provided for us. And then you're kind of like kicking yourself like, yeah, it was a momentary like satisfaction that money's in your bank, but then you had to like run your entire team ragged to like get it done. And the other thing that I also started to do to create boundaries around that is before we used to, if an opportunity arose and it was within our strategic plan or one of the programs that we would be running, we would be like, yeah, okay, we'll do that. We'll partner or we'll apply for that grant. And we would find a way to run it within that year. Now we're just like, we've taken a piece out of the corporate script, which is just like, we've already set our programs for this. So, when you go to ask them for money and they're like, we've already allocated all our money for the year, like come back next year. That's pretty much what we do now, is just say, like, we've allocated the programs that we're going to be running this year. Everyone knows what their work schedule is going to look like. And if you want to support us, then we can talk about what next year looks like. Because something that people often don't think about is the fact that every year we're pressing the reset, right? Like, we go pretty much back to zero every single year. So I'd like to hear from all of you around, the back to zero, the reset button, and the struggles that come with that.
I don't have any knowledge.
He's like, listen, I don't know nothing about lack.
So, what do you mean back to zero?
Well, like the fundraising, like having to fundraise every year for your budget.
So, trying to make sure I don't say anything wrong if the CRA. The reality is we've been lucky over the last 3 years. So I don't know if it's the work that we've been doing, the fact that we have black health in our name, etc. The fact that we're in the community and we're doing work, but we've been pretty for the last, let's say, 2 years consistent in terms of the amounts raised from diverse sources. So the thing that we've been focused on is how to structure the business of the organization to support the work that we're doing on an ongoing basis. So how much dollars do we have in reserves to support programs? So we're not always feeling like that crunch of like, okay, we're gonna have to, it's now February, we're gonna be starting brand new in April, and we're gonna kind of scramble over the last two months here to find resources. As I said earlier, we're not core funded, so I don't know what beyond the next 3, like what that looks like. So that's more of the stress or the pressure that I feel. But so we're not starting from zero is the point, because we've tried to structure the business in a way that's going to support just a bit more sustainability, multi-year grants, etc.
And you're dividing the work, because fundraising is stressful.
Oh, so no.
Okay,
No.
so you're working on that part.
Definitely. Like, I can't remember what you said earlier, but part of what I was thinking, it's easy to tell folks, avoid burnout, protect yourself, like let things fall off. But I literally feel like I can't. Because if I let something fall off, it means, somebody's benefits drops down, or, somebody's raise, or somebody, like I have all of these responsibilities. So I feel like I have to be there, and I have to, spend the extra time, the 7 days a week, pushing and pulling. I often get the piece like folks are like, you need to hire an EA. I'm like, I know, but are you going to give me the money on an ongoing basis for this individual? Because if not, leave me alone, because we'll figure it out. I know I need all these operational team members, but I got to balance out like how we sustain this over the long term. So I'm saying I feel the pressure in that sense. I think, my biggest struggle right now is to try and, create the space where I'm learning from others and like ordering the work in the right way, so that I don't have to be like all things to everybody. So maybe instead of focusing on, some administrative work or some projects, I'm focused on getting the money to hire the EA. So it's just how am I ordering the work and how am I learning from, folks' templates around those pieces.
Awesome.
I'm learning from your template. I think what comes up, so I think I had mentioned before, One People Philanthropy, which is the nonprofit side, we're still new, we're still in the development stage. So it's interesting that we're actually just starting like our first, gearing up to launch our first fundraising campaign. And that's exciting, but we're still very much in this learning process of finding the right alliances that work with us, that understand the work that we're doing, that really value the work that we're doing, that are excited to be partnered. And then, of course, we're talking kind of about not so much in that sense, but hierarchies. And so the idea of One People is really to work from a circular model rather than a hierarchical model. Obviously, there's still an ED, there's still a founder and all that kind of thing, but really empowering not just the people that are giving us the funds or the resources, but also with the community members that may have some kind of idea or connection that they feel empowered to bring in. And it's not coming from the community's pocket, so to speak, but making waves and connections with kind of like friends of friends, or that 6 degrees of separation piece is something that we're looking at as it regards to fundraising.
Yeah. And the reason why I kind of correlated the fundraising conversation with the mental health conversation is money is stressful for a lot of people, and particularly because we're serving communities that usually money is a huge stressor and part of the solutions that we're trying to bring to those communities. But as EDs, also our ability to fundraise is riding on people getting a paycheck, right? And so kind of making sure that we were checking in around that. So thank you for that part. We are going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with more conversation with these wonderful leaders.
Five seconds. That's all it takes for your first impression of me. Know how long it takes to shake it off? A lifetime. But I'm not waiting. I've got dreams to build. Places to be. Bias will not slow me down. Injustice won't define me, nor a narrative written in a time before me. I'm here to show you who I really am. Nobody knows what it takes like I do, like we do. It's time for the world not to just look at us, but to see us. It's time for the world to know that no matter what, Black youth can.
And we're back. Okay, so I think that in a lot of ways, as folks were, are you laughing at my and we're back?
Definitely.
You know what? One of my desires in life, and I hope that this can be used as an audition tape, I want this to be played back when I become a game show host. That's one of my desires. It never was something I wanted to do as a kid, but I'm super competitive, and I love games, so that's my goal in life is to.
Dreams are important.
Yeah, they are.
Is
so,
there a game in mind?
A game in mind.
Is
I
it-
wouldn't
Like a Price
mind.
is Right?
Can I tell you I went to the Price is Right live?
I saw that.
Oh my gosh. Anyways, I digress. Okay, so back to this conversation. I feel like I'm learning a lot from all of you, and I think we probably have questions for each other. And so I'm going to stop being Oprah, and I'm going to let all of you have the opportunity to see how it feels.
Perfect. Within myself, it's not necessarily a question. It's something I'd noticed even within tech space. It's more of I build out websites or something of the sorts. Along with that, it's I also have to have rejected clients due to the fact that their morals or anything of the sorts don't align with what I have going on, and it's something that's very confusing towards myself initially because at first the money. We're thinking if you have when I had like $0 in my bank account, I'm like, oh man, I need something, but at the same time, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do this project prolonged. And seeing that within your organizations is absolutely amazing, especially due to the fact that it's involving a lot of youth. And that is really, really important.
Yeah, totally. I think it goes across. I feel like moral dilemmas often show up in the work that we do, just like it would in the corporate sector. JP Morgan knows all about that. But anyways, any other question?
I think I have a question for you, Agapi. One of the things I think is missing from the sector is the idea of like an ED playbook, right? Like you learn the most from other experiences you've had in other organizations, or like watching your peers and asking questions and like getting that support, but nobody packages that up in a way that you can kind of like take in and not repeat those mistakes that other people have made that you could kind of learn from, if that makes sense. And so like, I don't know, CEE's been around for a minute. It's gone through like a whole bunch of changes. And I'm curious, like if you thought of like 2 to 3 things that were like important for the ED playbook, like what would they be for those of us that are kind of, again, on that come up, we're thinking about how we're supporting staff, we're thinking about how we're supporting ourselves, but we're thinking about like maybe how we structure the thing in order to really support those goals of supporting folks. So it'd be those, 3 must-haves, 2 or 3 must-haves.
I feel like the number one, I will say that I'm actually working with somebody now that's like, just tell me everything I need to know about being an ED. And I've like tried to, so every session we have, I try and like quantify all of these things. And like, these are things that I'm just like sharing. And by the end of the last session, they were just like, I don't think you understand, like maybe because you just like live it, but like, these are things that are so useful. So I do think that there is a need for that, particularly in our community, because we are working in such a nuanced environment where you're advocating for Black communities, and oftentimes Canada doesn't see the benefit in supporting a Black community. They don't see how that would help the entire country, and so that takes an understanding of knowing your audience and like figuring out what are the things that other people are concerned about or other Canadians are concerned about. What's their fear, right? The fear oftentimes when you're talking about Black communities, supporting Black communities alone, is like, if I help them, then what happens to my situation? And so I think one of the things that was really helpful early on, because in the beginning, it was actually affecting my mental health when I first took on this role. And I was like, knock, knock. Hey, you want to support Black youth? They're like, why only Black youth? Why not everybody else? And I was not prepared for that. And so whenever people would say no to me, they're saying no to like the mission, but in a lot of ways, I'm a Black woman walking into the space. Like, you're basically saying no to me. So like, I had to start to rejig real quick because I was like, I don't think I can sustain this. And so really thinking about what is it that people think that they're going to be losing, and then being able to bring that into the fold. So, oh, well, if Black youth have those jobs, and that means that there's no jobs for us, or they just need to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. Okay, I need to explain to you how bootstraps work. You got to have them first, right? Like, you kind of have to explain. And then also, it's just like, no, Black youth contributing to the economy helps us all. Like, everybody being able to contribute is going to help us all. So I think figuring out what people's why is and what their fear is around it has been helpful in being able to create a message and tell a story, right? I think number one. Number two is And like, this is just a reality because a lot of people come back and be like, part of our mental health is being able to not have to try so hard. But you do. Like, you have to come with a level of excellence that, like, especially in the beginning, I was like, if you don't proofread your emails, it's like if one of us can't spell, we all can't spell. So like, we're having to understand that we're representing an entire community, whether we want to bear that that burden or not. Like, that's just what it is. It's in the name, like CEE Centre for Young Black Professionals. You are only approaching if you're interested. And so you have to have a level of excellence in everything that you do. Like, oftentimes I think the sector kind of has like a little bit of a mediocrity to it. We're not really paid that well. You know, it's about the people. So we're not really concerned about, you know, what our marketing material looks like. I call it Windows 98 when we have flyers with like everybody's logo and they're all like fuzzy and I can't stand that. I cannot stand it. So there has to be a level of like excellence in how you are representing the brand, because what they're going to think is, okay, you want me to hire people coming out of your organization, but the people who work here can't even put a flyer together that looks like Crim and Crisp when we have Canva. Like, it just doesn't, the math doesn't add, right? So I think a level of excellence is something that is very important. And then I would also just say the third thing is to think big. Like, I had the privilege of being able to work for really large organizations, so naivety played a huge role in my ability to grow organizations, because I work for Toronto Community Housing, I work for United Way, bigger institutions. I'm like, oh, they have that. So when I'm strolling into the role, I'm like, okay, well, I should find myself that too. And I think in my time growing CEE, particularly when us as Black folks are meeting, and I encourage us to stop doing this, when we get together, it's like we're commiserating around what we don't have and what we should have and what we shoulda, woulda, coulda, rather than, okay, this is what we have, what can we make with this? How can we all come together? Okay, you know how to do this, you know how to do this, like we have a little bit of this, like let's make it work. And that's what we've done internally at CEE. Like, we did not have anything, but what we would say is like, we just need one funder. Like, I just need one person to be convinced that this program is dope. But in the meantime, I was getting prepared for that opportunity to come where they would fund a program. And we weren't like, oh, there's a funding, I call them, you know, waiting pools. Like, we had a bunch of programs that we thought would be super dope. If we were to have the money, think big, what would it look like? And so when funders came around, I could just pull that out and be like, well, we have this idea that's influenced by young folks. Like, are you interested in this? You're not interested in that? Well, there's this, there's that. Rather than waiting for a call up to come, then scrambling, everybody saying, you want a partner, come, let's do this thing. It allowed for us to be able to be prepared so that when the opportunity arose, then we were able to actually rise to the occasion and think big. Oftentimes we're coming from such a scarcity mindset that we're just taking whatever comes our way and maybe not taking the time to step back and kind of plan and think. Nuts.
I love that. Yeah. Thinking big.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think what comes up as you're saying that is like really allowing ourselves to use our imagination. I think sometimes, you know, we can shut ourselves off because it's like, I don't have time to be imagining things or to daydream, right? And I think that can do so much to help us rewire our systems, our nervous systems, our ability to think big. So I appreciate that. Something that I want to ask, I guess, everybody, if we have the time, is how do you notice maybe 3 things? Like, you notice when you're not doing as well. If that make, you know, like when maybe you're having to reject, you know, a client that's like, you know, becomes a moral issue. Like, I want to be able to do this work, but we don't align here. Or, you know, I have to say no to this experience, but, you know, do you note, like, I guess, yeah, from my own experience, but also for the people that are listening, as Black leaders, how do you notice when you're not doing well?
It usually starts off with me not being able to check off things within my task list, or I see I'm about to go to bed and I look up and go, there's 5 things I still haven't done yet. And then I continue to set that expectation of, all right, put those on to the next day. And then now I have 15 things I got to do within the day. And then after missed a couple of those, now I have 10 more things on the next day. And then it's just continuous dogpiling of just a bunch of tasks that could have been spaced out a lot better. And then I realized I think I might need to take a bit of a break, figure things out, and then come back towards it once I'm in a better mindset, which, again, there is no set time towards that, but I'm trying my best within there. Still do my best to figure it out as we speak.
I feel like that's been the experience my whole life. I've always been like a little chaotic, so a little, my to-do list is always long. It's always, all over the place. But I think the important thing for me has been to find people in my circle. So it's not staff. It's just other people sometimes, or maybe it could be staff if you trust them, who like know you well to be like, bro, you're off. Like you need to check in with yourself, and like, it's break time moment. So I think I'm grateful for those folks who, like, I'm the most reserved person. I won't run up into a room. I won't run up and make friends with people, but I'm grateful for the people who just like play that role. And like, just, it's almost like a little bit of a grounding for you.
Thank you.
I have horrible memory, and so I feel like over time it just like gets worse. So I feel like I get very forgetful. So like if I had a conversation with you and then like later in the day you're like, oh yeah, that thing, then I'm just like, okay, I need to take a break. I have like, so I don't know, maybe I need to go to the doctor for that, but I'll hit you up for some referrals. But I think when I get super, like my memory is just lost and I'm just like, when did we have that conversation? Like, that's when I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna sit down now, and you guys, I'll tap in when I'm ready. Yeah.
Thanks for that. Yeah. For myself, I can say I notice myself getting frustrated with myself. Like with the long, like why are you putting this to the next day? I think the long list is my thing, where I'm like, okay, move everything from here to the next day, and then try to like plan out the week. But yeah, always a work in progress. It doesn't have to be perfect. But it's nice, I think, to be able to hear from other people, like, yeah, we notice it, and sometimes we have to, like, check ourselves, too,
Yeah, and I also think just, like, letting people know. Like, I feel like I go into meetings sometimes, I'm like, I'm very annoyed right now, so I'm coming from that place, or I'm frustrated, and so, therefore, forgive my response that may not be as perky as normal.
I do have a question for all of you, as I have just met all of you today. One absolute pleasure. Absolutely happy to meet you all. But what has gotten you into the work that you are doing now? What was the beginning?
Sure. My mental health, to be honest, yeah. So all of the things that I do, like from a wellness perspective, are all things that I learned or took on. It's not like anybody directed me to these things. It's just things that I gravitated to, I think. I was raised in the church, and around probably like 16, you start to have a real consciousness, and I grew up in an environment that was not reflective of who I am. So like 95% white. And my background's Jamaican, and I'm so proud of it. And at the same time, my parents were very much of this mind, like, please don't embarrass us. Please just sit your bum down and don't say a word, unless. And so it kind of becomes a little bit of a mission, I think, to find things that work for you. I'm blessed and privileged to be able to say that I've been in and out of therapy for over 20 years, but now really having this an understanding, it's so valuable, but also having this understanding that a lot of it's from a Eurocentric perspective. And so then gravitating really to things that felt like I could be sovereign in managing my mental health. And so, started with astrology, and then tarot, and then Reiki, and mindfulness, and breath work, plant medicine. But those are the things that have all been something that I felt like, oh, this is helpful for me. And then being able to like learn more about it, educate myself, and then the work that I have ended up doing is very like peer focused, like mentor. But at the end of the day, and what I've learned with my own mental health journey is that like you can't tell other people what they're experiencing. They have to really understand it. And if you're not sitting with yourself long enough to be able to understand it, then it's hard to be able to navigate. So yeah, the wellness thing is really where I started, particularly around my mental health, and then sharing this with the people around me. Yeah.
Well, Lord knows you've been a mentor to me, Paul.
I feel like where I'm at today is 50% hard work, 50% luck. But I actually believe in I swear, I actually believe in like a purpose-driven life. I'm gonna try and give you the Coles Notes version. I tried my hardest to like say, get rid of like anything community, anything black. I'm just like, I just need a regular job, make me go work at the United Way or the city of Toronto, and just like not have to deal with like the minutia of what happens in community. But the harder I tried, it's the more it came in my face. Whether it's gun violence in the community or it's young folks dealing with mental health issues, or a range of issues that people would call social determinants, food security, housing issues, etc. It's all in your face to a certain extent, and I couldn't avoid it. And so I think finding Black Health Alliance that, like, again, the aunties and uncles had like nurtured over the last 20 years, and seeing that as a vehicle to kind of think about how do I add my own contributions and work on some of these issues. For me, again, it's like I think it's my steps had been ordered. Like, I was supposed to be here at this particular moment doing this particular work, and so okay, I don't have to run from it and go look for the city or United Way job anymore.
I think for me, like, I was a young person that would have needed help from somewhere like C, right? Like, my mother passed away when I was 14 years old. And so I think oftentimes we think that like young people who find themselves needing support is because they've done something or their parents, whatever the case is. But like, my parents came to this country as refugees. We ended up living in Toronto Community Housing Community. And like, that's just the circumstances that we were in. My mother passed away when I was 14. And so as much as we were already living in poverty, when you're a kid, like, you're not really paying attention to those things. But I then started to have to pay attention to it because I was young and I had to like figure out how to get a job and like, oh, I got to pay this place you pay rent to live here, like all of those things. And so I needed a lot of support in just navigating my like day-to-day life, like getting to school and having like tokens to get there was like very valuable. Like, tokens were like gold. And also just trying to make sure that I like put myself, like, went to high school and then went to university and all of those things. So I had a lot of support as I was navigating in those younger years. Like, I had to grow up really quickly, but social supports and like food banks, like all of those things that people that we serve in the sector, like I was a recipient of. And so I think naturally when you're a young person and you're going through like something like that, I think I was like very bitter to the fact that I was going through that. And I think anger was definitely there. Like, why my situation? Like, now all my hopes and dreams have to be deferred. But that actually didn't end up having to be the case because my community rallied around me and made sure that like, okay, you want to go to university? Like, here, people would send me scholarships, people would, right? And so I think I just naturally always wanted to kind of give back or pay it forward. And it wasn't until I actually joined a program very similar to a program that we actually partnered with Generation Chosen on, but just training frontline workers. It was with United Way. I went through that program. When I went there, I was like, oh, people at United Way, like, they're doing community work, but they look like they're well-to-do. You know what I mean? Like, their office is nice. So maybe I actually could make this a career. It was really meant for young people who are, and it was also a YCF initiative, city leaders. And so after that, it was kind of all history from there. I was like, oh, I can make a career out of doing for other people what other people have done for me. And so taking a leadership role, I take it very personally because I understand that it's not just a job. When I was on social assistance, my worker showing up that day to work was like whether I was going to be able to pay my rent or not. So I think oftentimes we think we're doing these things in motion, but these are real people's lives, and like our actions and our ability to show up to work every day rides on their lives like working out. So this work is very personal to me. That's kind of how I reached here, and yeah, that's why I kind of keep doing it. How about you?
For myself, it started off with an education. So I have nothing but a love for math and sciences and whatnot. And I'm really bad. I was really bad with English, which is very ironic. I speak it. But I had nothing but a love for math, and then I started tutoring a lot of my friends for free, or some of them were for money. It was more just about the distance, but majority of the time it was entirely for free. And then I started working within a non-for-profit organization that was teaching kids. And that right there, I realized how empowering education was. At least for myself, it was. I was constantly in my books. I played video games, just did my work, and that was it. And I loved it entirely. And a lot of the kids there had started off with barely any knowledge within the mathematics that they had needed. And then after provided with that knowledge, they felt so much better, at least from what I had been informed. But recently, this was an eye-opener towards myself. Someone who I had taught about 5 years ago had ran up to me and said, "Hey, man, I'm finally going to university." I'm like, what do you mean? I was like, "You're like 13 years old before." And after it hit me, I'm like, oh, 5 years has passed.
You're old now.
Yeah, that's it. But it was that feeling I never thought I would ever feel. I didn't think I would ever see that, because for myself, I would love for my teachers to see myself then to now, or before to now. But for myself, start with education. Then as I was learning, I realized how mentally straining it was within computer science. So after, as you had said, going to therapy, that right there is something I myself had tried, and I had done it quite frequently. This is absolutely useful for myself. And Generation Chosen, as I was presented the opportunity, I'd seen all the pillars that they had included within their work, and one of the main ones was mental health. And for myself, would love to work alongside that, along with seeking help within myself. So it's absolutely fantastic for me.
I love that. Well, I feel like we've learned from each other. Hopefully folks who are watching would be learning from us. I want to shout out to the team who made this all come together. So Matthias, Ivano, Trinae, and the social sector, the sector leadership team. I don't know where I was going with that. The sector leadership team. I want to thank you all and the City of Toronto for allowing this all to happen, and to all of you for coming out and taking the time to be a part of this. And hopefully those who are listening, we hope that you have been able to garner some learnings out of this. Please feel free to, send in your questions. If you want to hear more about anything, I'm sure we can get folks to answer them as we go along. So thank you so much, and have a great day, night, whatever time you're watching this. Take care.
Thank you, C.